Hi friends, so today we're going to delve a little bit into harmonium tuning, which is essential really for any serious harmonium player, at least to know some important key elements to the process. First off, when you get a harmonium from a maker, you want to make sure it's 100% in tune. 440 tuning, also known in the subcontinent as radio tuning or radio pitch. But one will notice after you play on it really hard and thrash on the harmonium for a couple months or so, you'll start to get some of the notes will go a little bit off key. And this is normal. Don't be alarmed, but it's a much easier task to be able to tune it ourselves, those few little things that happen, versus to have to find somebody to tune it. And it's not as hard as it may seem, but it does have to be done properly, especially when you have these really expensive and rare German reeds. Like, you want to be able to treat these reeds with a lot of care and precision, because it is common to, if they get over-tuned, that you have to replace a reed or many reeds. And tuning a whole harmonium, whether it's 2 sets of reeds or 3 sets of reeds, to do the whole thing takes a lot of time. I have tuned hundreds of harmoniums, so I can do it in about an hour and a half or so. But I remember in the early days it would take a couple of days of work. So definitely getting a harmonium in tune is the most important thing. Now, there's a few simple ways of tuning. What you want is some essential tools. You want to have a really good chromatic tuner. I use this classical orchestral tuner. Chromatic meaning it's got all 12 tones and is very sensitive. That's important for the precision. And then you have your screwdrivers, Phillips and flathead, to fit your harmonium. And then you have the tools. I've got these dinky ones I've made myself because I lose them or they get taken by customs on flights. But basically it's a little file. And this file, at the end, it's been filed into a diamond pyramid kind of shape, like sharp at the end. And you want these edges to be nice and sharp, because that's where you're going to be scraping the reed. So you could really take any file of this sort and then cut it in this way. Or just get the tools from Harmonium-Allah, but most of them just make them themselves, just like I have done. And then a nice flat piece of metal that's used to lift the reed. And you can even take the piece of the harmonium and just file it down so it's flat enough to slip under the reed. And as well, if you don't have one of these, you can always use a piece of sandpaper and just fold it really tight. And this is about, you could have like about 100 cc, 100 gauge, roughly, depending on the bass reeds. You want to use heavier sandpaper, while on the really high reeds you just want very fine, because you want to take off the slightest little bit of metal. That's important. You don't want to take off too much, so you want to have that control. So either sandpaper or the filed file. Can use either, but we'll do both just for fun. So next, you also want to have some paper and some scissors, because we're going to have to cut some paper to cover one, or if you have a 3-set reed harmonium, 2 of the reed bank, so that you're only listening to one reed bank at a time and going through that to tune it. So I've already listened to this harmonium, and it's been shredded on plenty of times, and we can hear there's a couple notes out of tune. So if you play it in, the notes are matching up right, you'll hear it sounds good. But sometimes you'll hear this, where the 2 notes are fighting to meet and they're wavering a little. Same on this note here, versus a, you can hear that little waver. So I know that one of those reeds from those 2 notes is off key. It could be the high reed, it could be the low reed, but we'll find out. So now we'll take our screwdrivers and open up the harmonium. Okay, now we've unscrewed all the parts and we've opened it up. And what we're going to do is we're going to cover one of the reed banks with paper as to mute it. So you take your paper and you'll do one full length here and just cut it. You can go from fat to thin if you want a little bit. Mostly you just don't want to crease your paper because you want it to be able to slide in. So I've got the fat side here, and you'll just slide it under each reed one by one. Like that. And then again. And you don't have to cover the full reed, you can just get most of it in there. It works. It's usually some of these high ones that are so close. So we can, if we need to use our tool, just to pull it up and over. Can pull it down a tiny bit too, but for the most part these are muted at this point. So now we just have this reed board that we'll be playing, and the note that we heard that was a little off key was this B. So you can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and just go up 12 like that. I usually make little notes on here as I go, but let's just go up 12. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And the reed is labeled as A sharp even though it's a B. And then we'll take our tuner. And I have it on fast mode here with different speeds. And we'll see where the note is. Maybe it was the one from the other bank that was out of tune, so. Because of the coupler, we're going to have to mute the higher octaves. So again, we'll take some paper and do the same thing. You can start from the 13th note, which would be the C again. Okay, because we have the coupler automatic on this kind of harmonium, on the other kinds of harmoniums you can change the coupler, so you turn off the coupler. While here we had to mute the upper octaves because when we play the C, for example, the next C will come. Anyway, so you use your thumb to push down on this part so that the air is being kept in. Now there's tools where you can screw it into there and clamp it, but I don't feel like it's completely necessary. So if we play the note, we can see it is this one that's a little bit flat. Again, it's the B. So to make it slightly higher, we're going to file near the end of the reed. Not on the end here, but on the end here. So we'll take our file on this one, B would sound like. I do it for reference too, just to hear it, to make sure I'm doing the right read. It sounds like the right tone. So I'll go into the reed here, use my handy tool to lift up the reed ever so slightly. You don't want to be too rough on these. And I'm going to scrape off a little bit of metal in this area evenly. And it wasn't so flat, so I'm just going to do a little bit. Now, the lower the reed, the more metal you'll have to take off to make a change in tone. While the higher ones, especially the really tiny reeds, you have to take off just the slightest amount, hence the really fine sandpaper there. So here, I'm just going to use this and scrape off a little bit like that. And do it in small increments. And just go back and check it. Still a little flat. Take off a little more. Almost there. So that's about right now. So I really took my time to do it slowly. Now when I'm tuning a harmonium, like for example, I have to tune like 80 reeds or whatever when it's a full harmonium, I get very fast at it because you know exactly how much to take off once you get going. So now we'll listen to the two notes together. Okay, so now that this one is in tune, we're going to compare it to the reed from the lower reed board by just taking off this piece here so that we can hear them together. Our reed is here, so we're going to compare these two, just in case it was the lower reed that was also off key. See how it sounds. Still sounds a little off key, so let's check the lower one. We're going to have to mute the higher one. You can always just rip off a little piece there if it's just one reed. So now we can just hear the lower one. Let's see where it's at. Yeah, it's quite flat. So I want to do the same thing and scrape the top of the reed ever so slightly. Now again, since it's a bigger reed, we'll have to take off more, but just do it slowly. So to use sandpaper, it's a similar idea. And again, you want to just be really accurate. You don't want to kink the reed because that'll break it. So take your time to rub it really evenly. And you just don't want to make sure, you want to make sure you keep it smooth in like the portion that you're taking the metal off. You want to make sure that it's evenly scraped, i.e. you're not going to scrape one side, you want to keep the balance there. So here's with the sandpaper, I've folded it up. This basically, you can make it a little smaller. You don't want to scrape the other reed. There we go. So we took our time to scrape it off bit by bit. Again, on these lower reeds, you have to take quite a bit off, but take your time to do it evenly. Now we'll pull out this paper and compare them and see if it sounds in tune. There we go. No more wobbling. Now the other note we'll do is a higher note. So it's this E. So we'll take off one of the, where is it now? It's here. So we'll take off one of these. Let's see if it's the higher one that's off key. Okay, a little bit flat. So again, we'll scrape near the end of the reed. Let's count it down again. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. That's how we know which one it is. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, which is listed as D sharp here. Again, on these high reeds, really take your time not to take off too much, so just be really gentle. Just a very fine scrape. So you want to scrape just this part of the reed here and get a little bit off. So you're using this tool, pull it up, and then you're going to scrape there. Let's see where we're at. Can go up a little bit. Good. So let's compare it to the same note on the lower octave. Okay, still out of tune, so it's the lower octave that's also off key. So again, we'll mute the one we've just tuned, so we can just hear the low one, the lower one. This is our note we just tuned, so then right below will be this one. Let's check out how it sounds on its own. Also flat. So again, we'll scrape just this top section here. There we go. So when we play the two notes together, they should sound not wobbly, inshallah. We'll unmute the first one we tuned. Shoop. Listen to them coupled. Sounds good. Let's listen with the higher note coupled here too, see. Sounds pretty good. So if the note is too high and we need to bring it down, it's a similar system. For example, if this note was sharp, was too high, instead of filing down this region here, from there to about there, we'd file this region here, the bottom part of the reed. And in the same way, you just scrape it off evenly and keep checking bit by bit. So now that we've got all this, at least these couple notes tuned, which were the main ones, then we pull off all of this, and then we'll screw the harmonium all back together. And then we'll listen to the notes with the harmonium closed, since the air seal will be 100% without a leak. So what's the first note we tuned? So it's good. And the other one up here. Good, so it sounds good now, those notes. I mean, the whole harmonium could use a quick tune, and in that case, like we did at the beginning, we'd section off, mute the reeds with the paper, and then go through octave by octave and just play one note, check the tuning, next note, check the tuning, and just go like that and give it a proper tune. There's a lot of different things that can happen with harmoniums. When they're well made, you can rail on them and they should be all right. But one thing that's very common while I'm here is that you get like a rattling note, like a sound, and that's often where the reed is slightly moves its position. So what you want to do is very carefully get in there and just push the reed in. I'll open it up and show you. So if one of the reeds is rattling, it'll be slightly off position and it'll be chafing on the side here. So the way to check that is you just take any of your pointy tools and you push it and make sure there's no contact with the outside of the metal here. See how it's completely flush but not touching? So it will be over a little bit. So in that case, you'd very carefully take it and just pull it over a little bit, or you could even very slightly file the edge that's chafing the metal. So also if you have a plier, you could carefully grip it and pull it a little bit in the direction it needs to go. But again, you have to be very careful because once you break the reed, you can't fix it and you just have to pop another one in. And as somebody that tunes harmoniums a lot for students, I have like a whole nother set of reeds for replacing reeds, either on my harmoniums or the ones that I'm tuning. Now another thing that's quite common is that like the sound of the key will not stop. Like when you pull your finger off, it's still like, it's still going a little bit. And most likely this is due to the a little shard of wood, because on the inside there's little bits of wood that will float around, so it could be just a tiny little shard that will stick on the pads on the inside. So what you want to do is simply carefully take the key out, and on here you might see like a little piece of wood like that, and just fluff it off. And that's just keeping the piece of wood or whatever kind of dust or dirt is keeping the pad from being flush and directly on the wood. So then you go in and then put it back like this. Now it's a little more complex when you have to go after the first octave, because then you have this coupling system. So what you'll do is, if you want to deal with this one, you'll notice that if you try to take this one out, it's stuck on the coupler. So ideally you'll go, so we've got our C, we'll take this off, just keep them in order. If it's our C that we want, then we take that, carefully take that out like that, and then we'll clean it. It's a little tricky to see, but when this note is pressed, it's pressing the coupler, which is going to couple this note up here. So we can see in here this piece of metal that's going to be resting on this piece here. So when we put the key back, you want to pull it up from this side, put this in, find that sweet spot, then as you set it back, you'll be using this to rest it back on that spot, so it's catching that piece of wood there. And so it gets more complicated as you go up, because you have more things being coupled. So that's usually the problem when it's a note that just keeps ringing, which is quite common too. So you just have to go in and dust them off. And sometimes if it's really dusty, you can take a vacuum and just suck out any of the extra dirt and dust in there. But anyway, that's the main points to know when it comes to tuning a harmonium. And yes, it happens plenty of time. And once again, getting the harmonium perfectly in pitch is very important from the beginning. And you can even ask the maker to make sure the harmonium gets played a bunch, because they could go through and perfectly tune all these reeds, but then when it gets played really hard and heavy chords, with a lot of attack, then sometimes, I don't know why, the metal changes, but some of the notes will go slightly off key like that. So if you have them play it really hard and then tune it again and then send it to you, that's the ideal way to do it. So if there's any other questions, it gets a little complex sometimes when it comes to the coupler. Like for example, if the coupler is not in place strong enough, the coupler is in here. If it's not tied down well enough, it could move a little bit. So when a note gets pressed, another note might come down a little bit. There's things like that that happens. But since you're in my Harmonium Mastery course, feel free to message in if you're having any issue like that, because there's a lot of little things. Anyway, thank you so much for listening and being part of this. Good luck with your tuning. Khuda Hafiz.